All right, traders, welcome to today's end of day recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is, I keep thinking that it's Monday today, but it is not Monday. It is Thursday, July 5th, and we'll start with the S&P chart. Some differences today. Even it's funny because sometimes people think, oh, it's really going to be a quiet week. It's a holiday week. A lot of market participants are going to be out. It's going to be low volume today, but sometimes on these days, these holiday weeks, there could actually be some interesting moves that take place. And there was there was definitely some interesting option trades that went up today. So I don't buy into that. I mean, I remember when I was on institutional trading desk, we would rotate. There would never be like desks shut down. There would be, you would switch. So even if you were, a senior person on a trading desk, you would still flip flop. One time you would have off the week of 4th of July. The next year you would be in. It's just kind of how it works when you have, like, for the most part, 3 to 5 people on a trading desk. But and then people also, people also will trade remotely as well, even if it's just for like an hour of the day to kind of do their trade. So I think that's changed over time. But in any event, you could see, and we'll go through some of the trade activity of the day, but something a little bit different today. For a while, I thought it was going to be pretty much what we've seen. And I will say honor the pattern, and until it remains. But this was a little bit different today. We closed on the highs today, something that we haven't seen in probably a couple weeks. Is that right? Well, we had this bar 2 days ago where we did close. We closed on the highs after going lower. We kind of had a funky day a couple days ago with that. Here we almost closed on the highs, but this is probably one of the nicest bars in terms of a green bar since all the way back here. We are still in this range. We're just at the top end of it. If you go to the 5-minute bar, or if you look at the 1-hour bar, you'll kind of see what I mean. And you kind of have to zoom out a little bit to see that we're back to the top of this range that we keep exploring back and forth. So we'll have to see if we can get above, I would say, 2740, 2745. Maybe go for this VPOC up here. This is how the day started. There was this virgin point of control that was taken out. A good example of how these come into play. Sometimes price action will seek it out. And then we just saw a drift lower for the first couple of hours of the day. Europe was doing this as well. I will very much watch what Europe does. I think we were tracking one for one, basically what the DAX was doing. Today, the DAX was up 1.6% today. It went all the way down to about half that, 0.8%. And then it closed, I think, around up 1.2%. So it did come back here. And that was basically it. We kind of punctured that bottom of value and, moved right back up. We had a little bit of whipsaw around the Fed minutes, came down a little bit, and then closed on the highs. So roller coaster day, but if you kind of stayed the course today and didn't overtrade, you did pretty well. My game plan, which I talked about in the video that I shot on Tuesday night, was to kind of just adapt a little bit and put in a couple of different market, put a little bit of some adjustments into my game plan. So I really didn't trade much today, even though I think if you were really fast, it's set up for some scalping on both sides. I traded a little bit of Amazon today as a day trade and just got what I was looking for from it. Right when we were selling off, I always kind of go to Amazon when there's some market weakness because I think it comes back. So even though it didn't do much for the day, I think I purchased in here and I sold right here. So that's fine. If you can find one of those trades every day where it's a winner, it doesn't have to be a huge winner. And then you kind of move on and you don't overtrade and kind of get caught up in this back and forth. So, that was the game plan. And again, having that game plan in place in the beginning of day, what you're going to do, which I knew. I knew that. I was like, watch this market sell off again as it's been doing, and it did. And then he kind of said, okay, well, things are getting a little bit attractive here. If you kind of got over the emphasis or the dismay of opening on the highs, where we were pre-market and selling off, and just kind of being focused into what you could actually trade around. There were some nice buying opportunities on the dip today. So that's just S&P. but it's just really good I think to kind of just go over the price action. And then talking about S&P a little bit further, there was some nice market breadth that happened today. So, if you look at that Amazon chart that I just mentioned, it really wasn't much of a mover today. The FANG stocks, which I know everybody always takes a look at, so I might as well do that. I thought Netflix was pretty interesting. Again, not a huge day, even though it was up 2%. Just kind of traded all over the place. I think some people scalped that. Google was actually up today too, so there was some nice activity out of the FANG stocks. And it looks like Facebook actually did the best. Facebook got a nice price target upgrade this morning, which may have helped it as well, but that closed basically right on the highs, and that gave you a nice entry too if you were to trade that, which, like I said, I did not trade that one today. But what I really liked was some other sectors participating today, and one of the ones that I thought was pretty interesting was the healthcare space. There was a little bit of J&J calls that were bought earlier. The nice thing about these options, and people don't talk about this too much, but if you're going to trade options, you look at the volatility that's in J&J. It's significantly less. Let me just bring up the July contract on my other screen here. But you're talking about an implied volatility of a 20, right? Versus if you trade some of the other names, if you trade Netflix, for example, you're looking at, for July options, an implied volatility of about a 64. So it's a third, it's a third, or 33% cheaper than what Netflix options cost, which kind of makes sense, right? Johnson Johnson is not a big mover, but if you start to kind of look at some of these other names that are moving, you could get a lot. The point that I'm trying to make is you can get a lot more bang for your buck with taking positions in some of the names that the implied volatility is really low. So this is interesting to see some of these names pop out of the 50-day moving average. Regeneron has been very strong. I sold Regeneron a little bit too early, but look at the move in Regeneron. So just again, let me just take a step back, but really where the performance has been, and I've talked about this now for several weeks, about the performance in healthcare has not been in the large cap. It's been all in the small cap names, right? And this is the ETF to track for small caps. It's not XBI. XBI is all caps, right? So the large caps are get the same weight as the small caps and the mid caps. But if you just want to see small caps, it's PSCH. This ETF is up 33% year to date, right? And if you go and you look at IBB, for example, which is up just a few points this year, this group, the large cap names, which I know people get very stuck on, has done basically nothing year to date. But that said, maybe they can start to get going a little bit. That looks like a pretty nice candle outside here. I think people thought that up here, and it kind of stalled and came back in. And I like healthcare. So that's the XLV ETF. And again, why I like this ETF is it is extremely cheap to trade. And you have a lot of overlap. Even though it's called the healthcare ETF, you have all the big biotech names in there. It's just a lot cheaper. You don't have the small cap, obviously, biotech names included in there as well. But if you look at XLV, I traded the Septembers, and you're talking about the implied volatility in the XLV, as in Victor, ETF going out a couple months is a 14. So it's really cheap. And versus like if you used IBB options going out to September, these are actually not that bad. It's actually these are 19, but still not as cheap as the XLV. XBI is even more expensive, 23. So if you start to go through some of these charts in this group, like look at Pfizer. Pfizer's just getting over this, actually closed on its high as well. Just a few other names to kind of go over. AGN looks interesting here, back above the 200-day moving average. Even Celgene, which has been a major dog. And, there was a little bit of call buying in Celgene as well. Small, going out pretty far, and I have to check open interest on that. But, we talked about Celgene today in the trading room, and I'll wait for this thing to get above the 50-day moving average, right? There's so many people, I don't know what it is with healthcare traders or biotech traders. They all think they know better than everybody else. I don't really understand it, but they are the most opinionated people that you will find on Twitter. They always think that they know, oh, it's going higher. That may very well be, but it's got to get over the 50-day moving average. And this has been a very tricky name. And I've heard people talk about on Twitter, talking about Celgene for months now, guaranteeing that it's going higher, and they've all been wrong. So for me, I will wait for a technical level to trade against for Celgene. It is funny. It is, some of the things that come off of Twitter. And you have to have a little bit of a sense of humor with this stuff. But if it gets above the 50-day moving average, it had a fake out here where it did it once, and it closed, got below, and you could have gotten out pretty quickly for a small loss. So I will look to do the same thing. I will wait for the price action. What am I sacrificing? A dollar or two in price? Like, why do people have? So again, I'm really on my soapbox today, but why do people think that they have to try to get the absolute bottom? If it's going to go up long term, you can wait till it makes the first move. It's not a big deal at all. But again, so many, I think, and these are retail traders that I'm talking about, that always think that they need to try to get the very bottom. Give it a chance to get to move in the right direction and have a tradable level. Don't just use your opinions. Use a trading system. You'll find you will do so much better. So that's what I would be waiting for. And so that said, that's what I would be waiting for in Celgene. Wait till it gets above the 50, and maybe if you want to use the top of value on the daily chart, maybe 79.45 as your stop, so you're not whipsawed on the 50-day moving average. The other thing that I noticed in Celgene, which I don't know why I'm spending so much time on Celgene, I just think it's interesting, and a lot of people have opinions on it. But if you go to the weekly chart, it actually took out this VPOC, and it's been hanging around here too. So I think that's interesting as well. All right, so that's enough about this space, but it does have me excited. Whenever I look at some of these moves sector-wise, I always go into go underneath the hood and take a look if some names are really starting to see some good breadth within the sector, rather than just one name. But it looks like a bunch of names are starting to look compelling. Also, look at Gilead, by the way. Gilead, I had some calls on probably about a month ago, 2.5 months ago, and I made a little bit of money, and it went back to my cost basis, and I said, that's it. I'm not getting trapped in Gilead calls because it's been a pretty tricky name, but it did fill the earnings gap and is now above this little area. Still underneath the 200-day moving average, but like I said, there's a lot of names that are performing pretty well. So we'll see if that sustains. I did go long this group today. I sent out a trade alert towards the end of the day because, again, if I'm starting a swing trade position, I'm going to wait till the end of the day. The way this market has been turning over intraday. So sticking to my game plan. A few other groups that did well today. Gold and gold miners. So saw a pickup in gold mining purchasing. Something, and again, this is fun to me because it's some different groups. So GDX did close above the 200-day moving average. So that hasn't happened in a while. This is a very sideways looking chart. But keep in mind, if you're in a portfolio and you have a lot of tech stocks, right, that are all correlated, they're all going to move together, which is great. When technology goes up, the Qs go up. You're going to do very well. But it's nice to have some diversification. So if you look at the correlation between gold miners and, say, tech stocks, it's negatively correlated, right? So you get a nice benefit of diversification by doing something like this group, going into the gold miners, is if you're positioned in a lot of momentum stocks. I was just going to show you this new feature that we just brought into play here. So if you go into GDX, let's see if I can bring this up. Oops. Yeah, so you can see the top sweeps activity for today in GDX. I recognized earlier there was some January calls, but take a look at what they did. They did some Septembers, they did some Julys, and I think there's some D's in here too that went up. So a little bit different to see GDX. And I know gold has been a very, very tough trade, but something that's kind of under-owned, I think, at this point is interesting to me. The gaming stocks did pretty well today. There was a call buyer today in ATVI. I've talked about this group a couple times over the last week or so. But there was a call buyer today in ATVI. The only thing I didn't like about this trade, the first trade that went up today, which was the August 3rd. It could be, we're going to start to see this now as we get closer to earnings season. They purchased calls the day after they report earnings. So, you know, um, that could be that somebody is either looking for a move into earnings or they're just looking to put some type of a trade on for that. I still like out of the my favorite chart out of this gaming group is Take Two. It had a nice day. I think this thing is ready to go. EA, which is my second favorite chart in this group, I think still looks okay, but I like the Take Two chart better. In the application software names, CRM looks wonderful. It had a real nice day a couple days ago. Kind of an inside looking. Didn't really retrace too much. All of this bar still above all the short-term moving averages, and looks poised to go higher, I think. Another name in this space, Coop Up Software, saw some calls today. I did not chase this name today. Every time I seem to chase the last couple weeks in this market, I get burned. But some nice calls that went up today in Coop. And you could see, boom, 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 boom. Nice size trades in some of these. And once you kind of add them up, you could see, so rapid fire, August and September. So it gives you a little bit more time than something like this. So what do you do with this name? Because some of these names you just, once calls go up around the high of the day, because it is, people sometimes fail to tell you that on Twitter, but these calls went up like right around here, right? So you may have made a tiny bit more if you would have chased, but this market seems, the way the volatility is, you might be able to get in cheaper. And that's kind of how I'm playing this right now. Just like Salesforce, if you go back to the Salesforce chart, right? And you did not chase on this day, if you would have bought on the close on Tuesday, you would have done much better. So who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the short term. But if you go back to Coop, I will put this on my radar and say, hey, if we get some market weakness, remember that call buyer that happened? So again, a lot of times you can get in much cheaper than what you see on the tape. So that's a name to watch. Another name that I think was very interesting, which we saw call buying, I think it was back on June 17th. They bought June calls in HOLX. They were back today. So I don't know. Something might be going on in this name. It's a pretty flat looking chart. They ended up buying 2,000 of these. And that's no small trade when you look at, and again, I really, I don't talk about this every video, but I really will try to only mention names that see at least like $50,000 in premium. If a name, even though it's aggressive and it's bought and it's $20,000 in option premium, I don't care. I really don't. People tweet about it and it could actually go up because people are tweeting about it. But if it's not over $20,000 or $25,000 in premium, I mean, honestly, that could be me purchasing it. And I'm not that big of a hitter. So it could be you who's listening to this. You could be buying a $25,000 trade. So I am not going to go nuts over a name. But anyway, so this traded, if you add up the premium, this one, so right around for like 220. That's what? About a 440. So that has some skin behind it, right? That's $440,000 of option premium that someone went out to September. That says something to me. Not a $20,000 option trade where somebody swept calls for 10 cents. So yeah, I think this is interesting. It may be worth taking a little bit of a position considering now we've seen multiple call buyers in this name. And again, pretty decent skin. So this is pretty easy too. Like, how would you manage this trade if you went into HOLX, either options or cash? If you decided to do the September ones, you use the 200-day moving average as your stop. And that's it, right? Easy peasy. Sorry, I hate to use that phrase, but it is. It's pretty easy, right? Also, in terms of gold, by the way, the morning was dominated by put activity. I think that's also what kind of helped give us a lift. I haven't seen that much put buying in at least about a week when we saw a heavy skew to puts versus calls, but heavy put buying in some areas of the market. So I think that kind of washed. Once sometimes when the option activity gets tipped so much to one side, it can set up for a tradable bounce, which is what we saw. BX, even though there wasn't very much option activity in BX today, this thing is breaking it, is starting to really move. KKR started this move where we've seen repeat activity in it. KKR is now breaking out. So look at the volume, by the way, on the breakout. Really strong. And they've been positioning in this name for a while. And that's a breakout out of here. I was a little bit worried about this VPOC. We'll see if it comes back and digests a little bit if you're not in this one. It's a bit overbought. Let's see if it checks back at some point, may give you an opportunity. But that BX also looks very strong. Another name that looks pretty strong is Apollo, which we don't see that much option activity in that one. But that also looks very strong to me. So like I said, a lot of interesting things. Coca-Cola saw a nice call buyer, also centered around earnings. Small orders in some of this stuff. UIS, which is, so this is an example that I just mentioned, like really, really small. So this was what, a $26,000 trade? That's something I'm not going to follow. The chart does look pretty good. If you wanted to play it, again, sometimes it's just an idea that you might be looking for. It made a nice turn here, Unisys Corporation, and closed close to the highs, almost firing off a MACD crossover. But is that really like, other than, giving you an idea, is that market moving? I mean, nobody's really putting any skin behind the skin in the game. $26,000. Do you really think they're going to they're just not somebody's not just following a name that's up on the day? Come on. What else do we see today? Saw some SFIX go up. Basically on the highs. This name ramped up. I would watch to see. I don't know if that's a new trade. I have to check open interest on SFIX. I mentioned ATVI. There was some GM call buying in the beginning of the day. The last one I'll lead with was, these European and emerging markets have basically anything international has just been dogged. But we saw some FEZ, some FEZ calls. This is the Eurostox ETF. Did fire off a MACD crossover, way below the 200-day moving average. But, it's been moving since the lows. So keep an eye on that. I thought that was an interesting trade that somebody put up. It was not a sweep, but it looked like that was a block of 5,000 calls that were bought. August 40 calls. Again, that will work if Europe goes up. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.